Hi, I'm James Hamilton from Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal, and today we're going to take a look at carbide turning tools while I make a wooden mallet. If you're a beginning wood turner, or if you're just thinking of getting into the craft, you've probably heard about carbide wood turning tools. Exactly what you've heard is hard to predict, because the internet is full of contradicting and sometimes misleading information. Well, I'm going to make a wooden mallet, which is an excellent first project for a new wood turner. And as I do, I'll not only show you how to make the mallet, but I'll try to clear up some of the misunderstandings regarding the carbide tools that I'm going to be using. Are they the best choice for a beginner? What do veteran turners think of them? Why do some people love them and others prefer high-speed steel? Stick around, we're going to answer all of that and more. Before we get out our tools, we have to prepare our turning blank. You want to make your mallet from good hard wood. I'm using white oak, which has long been used to build the hulls of warships, so I'm pretty confident it can take a beating. Since I have to laminate the layers together, I want to make sure I have good even glue coverage. I'm making my blank 4 inches square and about 9 inches long. As I mentioned, I'm going to be using carbide turning tools for this project. There are a lot of different ones out there. The ones I choose are the Rockler full-size tools, which come in 4 profiles. You have square for fast stock removal and straight cutting, such as cutting tenons. You have square with the corners rounded off for fine cutting, where you don't want to risk the corners digging in. They have round for cutting coves and curves, and diamond-shaped for fine detail work. The reason why I like these is because they're not only extremely well made, but they're a very high value, especially if you can catch them on sale. I'll put a link to them in the notes below the video so you can check them out for yourself. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, you have to decide if carbide is right for you. If you scroll through the message boards, you'll find 2 schools of thought. Some people think carbide turning tools are the greatest thing to happen to this craft since the variable speed lathe. Others say high-speed steel is still the way to go. Why so much debate? Mostly it all comes down to 2 things, ease of use and sharpening. Let's start with that first one. Traditional high-speed steel tools require more skill and finesse. You don't just walk up to the lathe and start turning. Each tool has to be held differently so that the bevel meets the wood at the proper angle. Using them correctly is a skill that takes time to learn. Carbide tools, on the other hand, can be used with good results the very first time you pick them up. You don't have to concern yourself with bevel angles. You simply hold the tool parallel to the floor and plunge it forward. That's because the carbide cutter is actually a scraper. You aren't shearing the fibers like you would with a traditional chisel. You're scraping them away. It doesn't matter if you're using a square, round, or pointed tool, the scraping action is the same. You don't have to change the way you hold the tool according to its profile on the end as you do with traditional high-speed steel tools. That fact eliminates a huge amount of the learning curve when it comes to wood turning, and it's why beginning turners love carbide tools. By the way, you'll notice here that I'm marking out the width of my hand. You want the handle of your mallet to be comfortably wider than your palm. Now, where was I? Oh yes, ease of use. The veteran turners will argue that while it does take more skill to use traditional tools, they leave a better surface behind. When you scrape wood fibers, particularly the end grain in every cove and curve on your turning, you're tearing at the fibers. This leaves a rougher surface behind, which requires a lot of sanding to smooth out. They're not wrong. You do end up doing more sanding on a project made with carbide tools, though the extent can be reduced by taking very light finishing passes. So, if you're a veteran turner who has already invested the time and effort into developing his skills with traditional tools, I can see why you would prefer those, particularly for those finishing cuts. It's worth noting, however, that even many pro turners do like to use carbide for the initial shaping of their project, because these tools remove material much faster and without the frequent resharpening along the way. And those who prefer to turn exclusively with carbide argue that they would rather spend extra time sanding than significantly more time learning to use and to sharpen their tools more effectively. Which brings us to our next point, sharpening. This is what originally drew me to carbide turning tools. I like the idea of never having to sharpen them. With traditional tools, you have to sharpen frequently, which takes you away from the project and requires a whole new set of skills. You may be able to quickly grind a simple bevel on a bowl gouge, but different tasks require different bevel shapes. There's actually a lot more to sharpening wood turning tools than woodworking chisels and planes. That often means an additional investment in a sharpening system and various jigs, and an even greater investment in time, both in learning the sharpening skills and in repeating them frequently throughout your project as the tools become dull. Carbide tools don't require sharpening. Their cutting edges can last, depending on the task and the quality of the carbide, 25 to 100 times longer than high-speed steel. Since many tools can be refreshed by rotating the cutter to one of 4 cutting edges, some turners report that while they used to stop and sharpen frequently while turning a single large bowl, a carbide tool can allow them to cut several bowls without the thought of resharpening. That convenience does come with an additional price. Carbide cutters do eventually need to be replaced, and they can cost between $15 and $30 each. But a hobby turner will likely only replace them once or twice a year, and the cost is much less than sharpening equipment can be. It's also worth noting that carbide cutters can be sharpened very easily using a simple diamond hone, which can significantly reduce the frequency of replacement. I should point out here, as I'm shaping the handle of my mallet, that I stopped frequently to check the fit with my hand. I like a little bit of a bulge in the center to fit the hollow of my palm. And I'm leaving a knob on the end to keep it from slipping out of my hand in case I get a little crazy banging things with it. Now, what about the argument that you can't get carbide as sharp as high-speed steel? It's true, you can't. Though very high-quality carbide can still get really sharp. In fact, it can get plenty sharp enough for wood turning. You can get a hand plane iron so sharp it will shave the hair on your arm, but you can only take so many feet of shavings before the edge is considerably less sharp. It takes a while with the hand plane, but imagine when those shavings are spinning into your cutter at 2,000 RPM. You can go through those same feet of material very quickly. My point is, you can get your tool as sharp as you like, but just as soon as you put it to wood, which is an abrasive material, it's going to dull to at least the sharpness of a carbide tool pretty fast. So the advantages of steel compared to carbide when it comes to sharpness are minimal, especially considering such an aggressive tool as a wood lathe. You may have noticed that I sloped the face of my mallet head down a few degrees. This is so it will strike parallel to my bench, even though my wrist will be naturally bent at the lowest part of my swing. So, should you consider carbide turning tools? If you're a beginner or a hobby wood turner, definitely. You can get started with them right out of the box and achieve good results without much practice. You may have to spend some extra time sanding, but that's offset by the fact that they cut faster and don't require you to stop to resharpen mid-project. The replaceable cutters can be pricey, but much less expensive than traditional sharpening equipment, and a simple diamond hone can greatly reduce the frequency of replacement. It's also worth noting that carbide turning tools can be safer as they are less prone to catching, and if they do, the result will be much less violent than what can be experienced with traditional high-speed steel tools. So if you're thinking of getting into wood turning, or even if you're a veteran turner looking for a way to remove material fast, you should check out carbide tools. And for your first project, why not a mallet? Slap a couple coats of boiled linseed oil on, and you'll have a great tool you made yourself, and maybe a whole new hobby in wood turning. Be sure to check out the latest issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal for more great projects, tips, and tutorials. You can subscribe for free at stumpynubs.com. We'll see you there.